Well, we've got an exciting story for you today, but before I read from the Gospel Story Bible and talk about that story, we're going to take time to do some worship, and then when we're done our story, we're going to join the adults in worship.
Treasure buried in a field, something more valuable than anything. We'd figure out a way to buy that land, so we could hold the treasure in our hands. And if we heard about a special pearl, worth more than any other in the world, we might sell all we had and buy a boat, so we could give that pearl a brand new home. For there's no treasure greater than to know our God and Savior. Ready, set, go, oh, oh. Seeking you is the adventure of a lifetime. You're better than gold. That you've been calling to us all the time. You sent your son so he could set us free, to love and follow you eternally. For there's no treasure greater than to know our God and Savior. Ready, set, go, oh, oh. Seeking you is the adventure of a lifetime. You're better than gold, oh, oh, and any other treasure. You are worth it, oh, oh, oh. Even if we have to lose our lives to find you, you are the God we want to know. Ready, set, go! Treasure greater than to know our God and Savior. Ready, set, go, oh, oh. Seeking you is the adventure of a lifetime. You're better than gold, oh, oh, and any other treasure. You are worth it, oh, oh, oh. Even if we have to lose our lives to find you, you are the God we want to know. Ready, set, go, oh, 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 oh. Ready, set, go, oh, 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 oh. Ready, set, go, oh, 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 oh. Ready, set, go. Ready, set, go!
Story 109, The Widow's Offering. While Jesus was in Jerusalem, he taught at the temple. Lots of people were listening to him there, but not all of them were his friends. Religious leaders, the scribes, chief priests, elders, Sadducees, and Pharisees took turns questioning him. They wanted to trick him into saying something that could get him into trouble. But Jesus could not be trapped. The more they tried to catch Jesus in a mistake, the more people saw how wise he was and how different his words were from everyone else's. Finally, in a loud voice, loud enough for everyone to hear, Jesus warned his disciples against the religious rulers. Beware of the scribes who love to look good on the outside where everyone can see them, he said. Secretly, they take advantage of widows and poor people by taking their money. They will be punished for their evil deeds. Jesus walked over and sat down where he could watch people drop their offerings into the temple treasury box. Many rich people were giving large amounts. Then a poor widow came over to the offering box. Jesus watched her put in 2 small copper coins. He pointed out the woman to the disciples, and he said, "Truly, I tell you, this widow has given more than all of the rest of them." The people who gave large amounts of money still had plenty left over for themselves, but this poor widow gave everything. Those 2 coins were all that she had to live off of. As Jesus left the temple, one of his disciples talked about how beautiful the temple was. "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." And the buildings were beautiful because King Herod had decorated them with gold and marble. But Jesus looked at the temple and he said, "A day is coming when all of this will be destroyed. Not even one stone will be standing on top of another." Jesus was right. A few years later, while many of those men were still alive, the temple was completely destroyed. This story talks about 2 very different ways to live. The religious rulers wanted to look good on the outside. So did the rich people who gave large amounts of money so people would be impressed with their giving. But it was the widow who trusted the Lord. Her beauty was on the inside where God could see it. In the same way, the temple building looked good on the outside with its beautiful decorations. But it was only a building. Jesus, our Savior, walked among the crowd in the temple, but few recognized how beautiful he was. What about us? Will we live for God's glory and trust in Jesus, or live to impress others? Like the Pharisees, we all are sinners on the inside. We need Jesus to open our eyes to see his beauty and take away our sin. Our story today is about the widow's offering. It all takes place in the temple. Jesus is there, the disciples are with him, and the Pharisees are there, along with, of course, the widow. Now, the Pharisees are all about looking good. They give a lot of money in the offering, but the widow, she gives 2 little copper coins. The widow's mite is so small it takes 2 of them to make up one of our pennies. And that is what the widow in our story dropped into the offering. These widow's mites are actual authentic widow's mites from back in Jesus' day. Who knows? One or even both of them could be the very coins the widow dropped into the offering. The Pharisees, when they drop their offering in, it makes all kinds of noise. The widow, she drops in her 2 copper coins, and it's hardly any noise at all. Now Jesus takes opportunity to teach because he knows that the Pharisees have gotten their money even from taking money from widows, devouring widows' homes, we read in the Bible. So he says to the disciples, the widow gave more. Those 2 copper coins were more than the Pharisees. How could that be? Because the widow gave all that she had. The Pharisees gave out of their great wealth. The rich people of the day gave out of their great wealth, but the widow gave out of her poverty. You see, it's what is in our heart. that counts, not what we look like on the outside. Jesus is asking for our heart. He wants us to not trust in our riches, but to trust in Him. When the widow put in those 2 small copper coins, she was saying, God, I'm trusting you to provide for my needs. The same is true of us today. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join us for our children's service today. I hope you enjoyed the worship and the Bible story. And now we're going to join the adults for the main service.